Hello and welcome to another game review episode of Dog Day Chess. The game we're going to look at in this episode contrasts the safety of a castled king with the vulnerability of an uncastled king. And usually if you find yourself in the position where your king is castled and your opponent's king is not, it's a good idea to open up the center. In other words, open up lines of attack towards the uncastled king. And in doing so, you'll be putting pressure on the king, and often your opponent will be pinning his or her own pieces to block checks and to ward off your attacks. And that's essentially the strategy I followed in this game because I did find myself in that situation. And despite the pressure I put on my opponent's uncastled king, he was able to defend most of my tactics and maintain near equality for much of the game until towards the end the pressure was just too much. So let's begin. The opening is pretty standard. I get into the Ruy Lopez opening, and this is all main line. Black captures my pawn, and I counter attack the E pawn. So here Black pushes his D pawn, and this move is not really in book. The theoretical move here is to bring the knight to D6, attacking the bishop. But the D pawn is pushed, and this allows me to win back my pawn because after exchanging the minor pieces, I can take this pawn. Now Black answers by pinning my knight to my queen. And I respond to that by bringing my rook over to the E file. I'm attacking the hanging knight, and I'm also bringing my rook onto the same file as the king, which is still in the center. Now Black responds by bringing his knight to safety and doubling his attack on my pinned knight, which is usually a good idea, except for the fact that now he's exposed his king to a discovered check. So by capturing that pawn, I have a discovered check on the Black king. Black responds by blocking the check. The knight is now pinned, and I continue to open up the center by capturing or trading off the pawns, and the queens get traded as well, and so pawns and queens are traded, but the center is wide open now. So my rook here on D1 is actually causing my knight to be pinned. So I move my rook over to E1, checking the king, and Black blocks that check with his bishop. And here I move my knight to E5, forking the bishop and the C pawn. Now Black could save both of those pieces by moving the bishop here to D7. The bishop protects the pawn and the bishop itself is protected. However, this would allow me to win the bishop pair and to force the king to move and not be able to castle. So instead, Black moved his bishop to a safer square and allowed me to capture the pawn. And this pawn capture actually doubles the attack on this pinned bishop. Now both my rook and my knight are attacking that bishop. So Black moves his knight to D5 to protect the bishop, and I follow up by attacking the defender. I bring my knight out. I want to eliminate this defender and try to win that bishop. If Black had decided to move his knight to safety, then of course this would have allowed me to win the bishop outright. And alternatively, if Black had decided to protect the knight with the bishop, then I would have been able to win the bishop as well, because after eliminating that defender of the E7 bishop, I could have won it. But instead what Black did, moving back here, is Black attacked my knight. So here I continued by capturing the bishop, and Black moves his bishop here to close off the E file. So then that just leaves us where we both capture each other's knights. And then I bring my bishop out to E3, essentially connecting my rooks with tempo because this is a check. And the king comes further out. Now, my next move may seem like it weakens my king position. The reason I made this move is I wanted to restrict the squares of the Black king, which is venturing further out into the center. But I'm not really weakening my king position that much because there's black has no dark squared bishop anymore to attack me along this dark diagonal. So black responded by bringing his king even further out into the middle of the board. I didn't really expect that. So at this point, I actually sacrifice my pawn to get a little bit of counterplay. What I do is I bring my rook out here, and I'm sacrificing this pawn because I'm going to follow it up by bringing my bishop into play here on d6, setting up a discovered check on the king. So black responded by attacking on my backward c-pawn, and then I bring my other rook into the picture. And this move forces the black king over to the g-file, and it allows me to capture that bishop safely. So the king moves to g6, and I start bringing other pieces into the picture to further restrict the king's movement. The black king is very cramped at the moment, and so black tries to stop that push by playing h5. Then I bring my rook over to check, and black falls to the h-file, and I capture the h-pawn. Black comes back to the g-file, and I come back to the g-file with check. Now if black had continued by playing h7, then it would have made the win a lot more difficult for me, but instead black played king to f6, and this allows me to play a mate in one. So if you'd like to look for it, please pause the video and try to find the mate in one. Okay, well here it is, bishop to e7 mate. So I thought this was a good example of how to handle a situation where your king is safely castled but your opponent's king is not. Open up the center, open up lines of attack towards the king, keep the pressure on, force the opponent to pin pieces, attack the pin piece. As always, I hope you learned something from this episode, and thanks for watching.